imagination doesn't mean that you're not going to fail. It actually often means that you're going to get more clarity on what you should do next because you were willing to be creative and imaginative enough to try something new, to go, oh, that's foundational, that's sound, but I just was looking at it the wrong way. Or I can have arrived and go, it's as good as it's going to get. I'm never going to learn anything new. Yada, 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 yada. So Nelson reimagines, not so ironically, in one of the most challenging seasons of his life, what dividend-paying whole life insurance can be, not what it had been, about what he understood it as right then. Reimagining things we already know is imagination. And it actually turns our daily life into something that can be much more energized and fun because we have more clarity on accomplishing what we want to accomplish next because we know what we're going to use and we know why we want to do it. It's our journey to taking over the banking function or becoming our own banker really starts with changing how we think in our mind, which is imagination, and re-seeing things that we thought were always there that are not really the way that we thought they were. And once we're willing to do that, I can tell you that that'll start leading you through a cycle of learning new things because you go, well, if that was something I thought was true wasn't, or is different than I thought, wonder if that is too. And then you can't unsee it because then you go on this journey of just like, what else is there out there that I've been told that I should believe that's really a half-truth at best or not true at all, or it's told to us to keep us where we are.
Welcome to the Cashflow Legendz podcast with your hosts Nate, Brandon, and Brock. Remember, our insights are not direct financial advice, so consult with your financial team before making any decisions based on the topics discussed in this show.
Welcome back to Cashflow Legendz. Nate, Brock, and I are excited to be here. It is a beautiful morning here in East Texas, and I don't know what the weather's like in Nashville or Nate's way. Is it beautiful?
Yeah, it's better than what Texas has.
Good. We were having a conversation before we even hit record on the privilege of challenges. And it's a very hard thing to realize that it takes imagination to take something that appears to be a challenge and to reframe it into something that is an opportunity to grow. And today we're going to be talking about imagination, and we're going to be focusing on Nash's point of imagination and becoming your own banker as we do a walkthrough of his book. Nelson's book is 92 pages. I try to reread it once a year, and I often go back to it depending on the conversations that we're having with our members and questions they have. And it can really be more of like you check, one area or another, but you can really read this book in less than an hour and a half if you really focus on it and get after it. And if it makes you uncomfortable, lean in. Good. Because there might be some thinking or some imagination needed in our lives that we don't see. So last week we talked about where all this came about, where the infinite banking concept came from, where Nelson really began to build the foundation on it. And I always like to bring up this point, Nate and Brock, and I know y'all won't mind this, is that any of our mentors that we've ever talked to that knew Nelson personally, which Brock, your dad knew Nelson personally, spent some time with him, in the 90s, very cool stuff, said that he always would rather talk about the Lord before IBC. He'd always rather be sure you knew Jesus before IBC. And that resonates with Nate, Brock, and I at a deep level because you can have all the money in the world, but if you don't have the peace of knowing Jesus as your Lord and Savior, you're broke.
You're screwed.
You're screwed. Yeah, to put it more bluntly. Thank you, Brock.
Eternally.
That's right. So I can say with confidence and humility that we know it's a privilege to even be able to say that in America on something that's going to possibly touch, hundreds, thousands, if not more than that, ears. But we also take very seriously having the opportunity to have those conversations. If anybody, feels like the Lord's knocking on their heart and they want to talk about it, we're just as thrilled to talk about that. And money is just a thing. It's an inanimate object, but we can put imagination behind it. Just like if I gave Brock and Nate a shovel, one of them may dig a hole and one of them may build something that's beautiful and lasts forever. All right. So imagination's important. So Nate, you are the guy in our business partnership that is full of imagination. Nate runs on the diving board and he jumps as high as he can and he gets as high in the air as he can and he goes, "We don't have any water. Where's the water? What do we need to do to get water before I hit the ground?" So Nate loves imagining things and he's really, really good at it and very creative. So how does that tie into becoming your own banker and Nelson's thought processes? And why is it one of the first things he talks about?
Well, when I think about imagination and what we're talking about, I'm kind of overwhelmed with gratitude because Nelson's point in this section of the book is about things that are already fixed, and we get to go explore them with how we're wired, and we get to go discover things that have already been done, have already been laid out and created, and we get the gift of discovery through that. And so anytime I have an idea or anything like that, it's based off of something that's already present, and it's just a discovery of something that was already there to begin with. It wasn't anything that I created on my own. It was based on something that was already fixed, and that's the point that Nelson's trying to make here in this section. Is there are a lot of things that are out there that are they're fixed, and we have this awesome privilege of going on this journey of exploration and discovery.
I love that. So, Brock, we were talking about baseball before we hit record. And one of the most beautiful things in my mind in baseball is when imagination is used inside of a play, inside the rules of the game, inside of the foul lines, inside of the bases, all the things that are almost always identical besides distance of fence. Everything else is structured. And you see it happen. And if you love baseball the way we do, you go, wow. And the real word that you're saying wow about is imagination. You know, it may be a pump fake on a play and backdooring a runner. Or it may be, you know, throwing all the way across the field when you shouldn't have been doing that. What do you love about imagination? And have you, you know, you're younger than us. We like to talk about that often, but that's really a compliment because I think you're already more imaginative than we are about money. But what is Nelson getting at when you read this page from your point of view?
The fact that you got to use your mind on what you're going to do, and to relate it back to baseball, for example, so my little brother plays baseball, D1 athlete. He was gifted with the genes to be an athlete and throws very, very hard. And so we go to baseball games all the time. My whole family just goes constantly. And what's funny is, my parents have been dating since the 8th grade. My dad played top level baseball, is one of the best in Tennessee and all that stuff. And so she's been around the game of baseball since they were in the 8th grade. I'm not going to tell how old they are today, right? But it's been a long time.
Yep.
She has been around baseball longer than I have, but yet I played in it and my dad played in it. Both played at a high level. And when we watch the game, there are certain things that me and my dad can see and understand and imagine and realize because we've played the game, we've been in the foul lines, we've done the thing, whereas my mom has only watched and seen.
Mm.
And so when you think about that, that's kind of the same thing within our world is you have the people who talk about the infinite banking process using life insurance and doing the things. And all that they really have is, oh, it could do this, it could do that. It had yeah, it could. But then there's the person who's done it. There's the person who stepped out there and got a policy, whether it was small or big. They actually went and did it. And their imagination is so much larger once they got into it and they did it rather than the person who just watched from the sidelines.
This is good stuff. And it actually, if you think about it, when you read Nelson's book, there's something a little further into the book called Use It or Lose It. And what you just described is a perfect example of that. Because you and your dad and your brother have played the game at a high level, you've used the things that you've learned and your imagination has refined some of them. It has cemented some of them. And your mom knows the game really well, but because she's never sat in there and actually had to use the skill sets of what it's like to try to hit a 95-mile-an-hour fastball, or what it's like to try to bunt a slider down and away, to the right side, when moving runners over in the 7th inning to try to get the leading run in scoring position, those are use it or lose it. And inevitably, what I love about this is the biggest step that has to be taken often in this process is realizing that we don't know everything and being willing to go, this is going to take some action. And also another one of Nelson's comments that he talks about often is overcoming arrival syndrome, which requires us to have some imagination. Because if Brock and I were talking about this before we hit record, Nate, if I'm sitting in the baseball stands by somebody I don't know well, it does not take me but about 10 seconds of hearing them talk about the game to know whether they know the game inside the game or not. That's not a knock on them. That's just because it's all I've done my whole life is play baseball, still play baseball. So when I hear things like just get the bunt down or throw strikes or it isn't that hard to hit, I know immediately that this is not going to be one of those in-depth conversations about baseball. And truth be told, 80 to 90% of everybody that comes into a baseball stadium to watch a game is there to be entertained. Purely. Nate, Brock, and I go there to use imagination.
Let me ask y'all both a question. Are you a fan of the pitch clock?
Ooh.
Yes.
Yes. Overall, because I think it keeps people engaged as far as the fan goes, which it's not an easy sport to stay a fan of to begin with. Go ahead and go where you're going with that.
Yeah. Well, here's why I brought that up, because the rules of baseball are fixed. You've got 3 outs, you got 3 strikes, you got 4 balls, all that stuff. And someone imagined something inside of the rules that were already fixed about how to improve the game.
Yep. I like that. That's good. Baseball has made the bases bigger, and they've given reasons why for safety and things like this. But I can tell you with certainty, because I have touched a regular size base my entire life, when I go to a field that has the new bases, something feels off. As minute as that sounds, because it's a change inside the structure of the rules, it feels weird at first. That is no different than what Nelson is trying to get us to understand with imagination is like, look, it's going to take creativity to imagine yourself doing something different than what you thought was the right thing to do if you want to get to where you want to go next. It's going to take adjusting. It's going to take readjusting. So,
well, and for anyone who hasn't listened to the previous episode where we talk about the story of how the infinite banking concept came into play, Nelson uses this example to teach on the fact that whole life insurance was fixed and he just saw something inside of it that nobody else had seen.
Very well said, Nate. That's so true. Okay, let's frame it this way. Here's a question for everybody listening. If you knew me at all or didn't, or Nate or Brock, and you heard us say anywhere, or you read anywhere, what if there was a way that you could break free from the cycle and create your own financial reality? If you just heard that question, and let's just give us the benefit of the doubt and say you didn't think we were, snake oil salesmen or liars or something like that. And you're like, these guys probably are worth listening to, or you read it in a book somewhere. What would that lead to? And the first thing that most people do is they try to answer that question with the same thinking that they've always had. And it keeps them locked in there. And then that creates fear because they have to learn something new. Okay. The reality is that there are certain rules in the financial system, Brock. We know that. The real fun piece, and I said fun, is realizing that creativity and imagination can play a part in it. So where are some of those things that you see, Brock, often on the creativity and the imagination, in your daily life that you enjoy when you interact with people?
I think a lot of it comes from something that I talk a lot about, which is your human life value and understanding what one of my mentors, Michael Eisman, talks about, which is you are your number one asset and your number one investment is the place where you have the most knowledge, experience, expertise, and then long term where you have the most purpose and passion.
Mhm.
Because if you, let's say, everybody wants to invest in real estate, you could invest in real estate and just buy one house at a time. But what's the difference between a guy who or girl who purchases one home every chance they get over the next 10 years and someone who purchases one home, finds a purpose and passion in it, and scales to 1,000 homes in 10 years than the guy who just went to 10 homes in 10 years? Well, it came from his imagination. It came from his ability to see into what he wanted his future to look like and imagine the life that he wanted and then put the plan around it and put it in action to make something of it.
Love that. Here's something about imagination that I'm learning in this season of life. Imagination doesn't mean that you're not going to fail. It actually often means that you're going to get more clarity on what you should do next because you were willing to be creative and imaginative enough to try something new, to go, oh, that's foundational, that's sound, but I just was looking at it the wrong way. Or I can have arrived and go, it's as good as it's going to get. I'm never going to learn anything new, yada, 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 yada. And those are clear indicators for Nate and Brock and I. When we hear people say those things, they're not ready to be going through the process of unlearning their learning yet. And that's okay.
I think when it comes to imagination, there's some things that we have to realize, which is imagination can be foolish if you are foolish with the imagination. You're just throwing all kinds of stuff at it. But there's a difference between having an imagination that's just kind of childish to imagination that's mature and imagination that you could actually put a plan behind and get after.
Mhm.
Because once you're on the plan, everything else kind of grows from there. And I think, it's a whole lot better if you're going to be the man in the arena. I think that was Theodore Roosevelt that
Yep.
has that speech.
Hmm.
But once you grasp, I know that we do this, once you grasp that reality that just because you can imagine that it's not that you're not going to fail, but there's one of two things that are going to happen if you believe this is true. You are either going to succeed in that imagination or you are going to absolutely fail and crumble because you're going to be able to see God come through on the other side of that. And once you grasp the fact that you are either moving into your purpose and you're going to succeed in that imagination, or you're going to fail and see God come through on the other side because he has a purpose behind it, then I think there's no reason for you not to have an imagination and chase that because it's in your mind, it's on your heart for a reason. So you might as well go after it.
That's a great reminder of something that I've seen and had a conversation about a lot lately. And I do believe, because you just said it, Brock, is it's this reality that if we seek to have our purpose in alignment with what pleases the Lord because we're created in his image, well, creativity is very similar to imagination. Is what can we imagine? And most of us, only speaking for men here, we don't have an income producing problem. We have an out of alignment problem. We're not in alignment with what our purpose is because we don't know whose we are yet. And once we know whose we are, we have more clarity on how he's created us in his image to be creators, which many of our mentors refer to that as producers. And producers make up 10 to 15% of the world, maybe. And the other remaining part is normally consumers all the time. And so when we realize this, it requires imagination. But let's just use this simple example. It's one I love to use often. What if you sat here and you thought, everybody listening, you thought to yourself, what if I controlled every dollar that flowed through my life, in and out? Just what if I were to be able to do that? Most people that I've asked that question to early on, first of all, assume it's not possible. There's no way you can do that. But us three guys sitting here and many other people way more worldly successful than us that understand how the rules of the game work know that is possible. So are we standing here hitting record or sitting here hitting record, Nate, to lie to everybody? Or are we that comfortable being viewed as knowing something that most people don't want to believe?
I would say we speak from experience, our own experience, but also the experience of our mentors. And that's why we show up with confidence in what we're talking about, is because we've seen it firsthand and we know, um, you know, this idea of creativity is acting on creativity is really an act of faith, because you're either going to learn a lesson or you're going to learn a lesson. That either way, there's a lesson that's going to be learned through
Yep.
pressing into and taking action on creativity. Um, and I think when you are sincere in your relationship with the Lord, creativity and ideas are blessings that we get to see how they play out. And the reason why we continue to show up each week is because we know that the more and more that we control our money, the more and more peace of mind that brings to us and our families. And we just want more people to experience that.
That's a great point. Here's a simple example of imagination in finance. If everybody in America listening to this podcast right now heard us say anything about whole life or insurance, majority of them would have a belief system built around that is something I either don't need, or it's for dying only, or it's only a product that wealthy people use. There's some limiting beliefs that come into that almost always. Or somebody said this about it and it's bad, or whatever the case may be. So the first imaginative process that we can go through in this, that Nate and I had to go through, that Brock and I had to go through, that we all go through, is viewing insurance and a specific whole life insurance policy as not just a protective tool, but as an opportunity to make everything else that we're going to do more efficient, more certain, more under control. And that's just a simple way to lean into, that's imagination right there. Is it possible that what I've been taught about whole life insurance is either wrong or I'm only getting part of the truth? Is it possible? And, Brock, why do most people stop right there instead of leaning in and going, wonder what I could find out? Why do you think that is?
Because it's easy.
There you go.
I honestly think that most people just take somebody's word from it, whether it's the media or something else. But yet, if you dug into it, you'd find a different answer. Like as you were talking, I was looking at the books behind me, and I could probably pull out 20 to 25 books, whether it was a tax book, an asset protection, estate planning, or wealth building book, that would tell you all about whole life insurance and why it's good. The two directly behind me, Lifestyle Investor and What Would the Rockefellers Do, would tell you like how great they are and how good of a tool they are. But if you don't lean in to go check it out, then you wouldn't know.
It's
It's a whole lot easier for somebody to just hand their money over to somebody and put it in an account and be promised, oh, well, it does 78% over time. You'll get that average, and just say, okay, than it would be to sit down and be intentional about your finances and pay attention.
So Nelson reimagines, not so ironically, in one of the most challenging seasons of his life, what dividend paying whole life insurance can be. not what it had been by what he understood it as right then. Reimagining things we already know is imagination. And it actually turns our daily life into something that can be much more energized and fun because we have more clarity on accomplishing what we want to accomplish next because we know what we're going to use and we know why we want to do it. And most of the time, if we gave anybody the opportunity to say, would you rather keep doing what you're doing or would you rather do something different that gave you better results? Everybody's going to pick the better results. The problem comes in and the fear comes in when you start talking about how, because it creates the fear of a resistance of overcoming this thought that I have to think differently. I have to be different than other people. I have to think about the edge of the coin instead of the heads of the tails. I was thinking about that at the baseball game last night. You got the home crowd and the away crowd. You got the heads and the tails. There's two sides. Umpire makes a close call. One side's always going to be unhappy. One side isn't. The edge of the coin is the person who watches the game and sees all the little nuances and appreciates the game inside the game, where the umpire goes, my catcher has been communicating with me all day long, protecting me, blocking baseballs, being sure that I hadn't taken any off the chest. And he's got a great rapport with me. And I'm going to give him that pitch outer half because the pitcher has been there all day, as compared to the other team where the pitcher has been all over the zone. Well, it's easier to call strikes when you have that other situation. That is the edge of the coin. And most of us prefer to stay focused. I'm guilty of this in parenting and marriage and anything else. Most of us prefer to focus on the heads of the tail side. When it's inevitable, as Brock just alluded to in all those books behind him, there is always an imaginative edge. And the people who understand it and look for it, not surprisingly, normally have more peace of mind, more success, more creativity, more opportunity, because they're willing to look for that edge, which is a pretty cool thing when you think about it, because guys, it is there. And when you see it, you cannot unsee it. And as Ryan Griggs, our dear buddy, said up on stage a couple of weeks ago at the think tank, he said, yeah, I do this and take all this criticism because it's what I want to do just to make money. It was a pretty good thought. He's like, yeah, I try to teach people the truth about dividend paying whole life insurance when 90% of the world thinks I'm out here trying to sell something and make a commission. Yeah, I'm choosing to do that because that's fun. When you think about it that way, it's a good reframing of, I can say for me and Nate, we've lived the other side. We've done all the things we're told to do. We gave our money to somebody else. We were told it was going to do this or it was going to do that. And we have 7 or 8 years to be able to compare it to and go, I'm never going back. The way we do things now, even though it seems risky to the world, is the safest thing we could do first. It's the most sound thing. It creates the most opportunity.
Well, Brandon, from a faith perspective, once you taste grace, you can't get that taste out of your mouth. Like once you truly experience and taste grace, you can't get that out of your mouth. This really this really chose us. We didn't, to Ryan's point, this really chose us because we were exposed to truth that we could not unsee. Like once the truth was exposed and it connected with our thought process and everything like that, and it made sense, there was no way to go back to the way we were doing things before. And so we had to make a change. On the personal level, we had to make a change. And it was through those changes that we were making on the personal level that, from a professional standpoint, we just got fired up and excited about going and helping other people do the same thing.
Good point. Here's kind of some closing thoughts, is that what I think Nelson was really doing a great job of so early in the book, the first half of Becoming Your Own Banker is about mindset. It's all about mindset and how we think. And what he was really saying is our journey to taking over the banking function or becoming our own banker really starts with changing how we think in our mind, which is imagination, and re-seeing things that we thought were always there that are not really the way that we thought they were. And once we're willing to do that, I can tell you that that'll start leading you through a cycle of learning new things, because you go, well, if that was something I thought was true, wasn't, or is different than I thought, wonder if that is too. And then you can't unsee it, because then you go on this journey of just like, what else is there out there that I've been told that I should believe that's really a half truth at best, or not true at all, or it's told to us to keep us where we are. Because I don't think anybody ever says, I want to be average. I don't think anybody says, I want to just barely succeed enough to get by. I don't think anybody says, I want to work for 40 years at a job I don't like just to make ends meet. So if those things are happening in our life and we're allowing them to continue to happen, it requires a reframing of our thinking and some imagination to go, what am I not seeing, and where am I willing to get uncomfortable? And that's relevant for anything. It's not just about money. Brock and I had a chat yesterday where we were just having some direct conversation about our processes and our systems, and we pushed each other back and forth on our thinking with some questions and some thoughts and some bluntness. Okay. We have to be willing to be okay with that if we want to grow, or we can stay where we are. Brock's smirking, but he agrees. I can tell. Yeah. So remember that imagination is healthy. And remember also that imagination is childlike. And being childlike is not a bad thing when it comes to how we think, because think about your kids when they see these beautiful things that we don't see, because they still have imagination and hadn't been pushed out of them yet as they've gotten older. Money's the same way. It's just a tool. Think about how you can use your imagination to use it differently. And here's a practical thing to tie it all up with a bow. Spend some time this week writing down money coming into your life and leaving your life, and practically look at, is there any way that I can reduce how much of that's leaving my life in a way where I keep control of it? There are ways to do that, very simply, but just think about that and ask yourself, how much of this money is just passing through my hand to somebody else? And how much of it would I like to start keeping certainty and control over? What you'll find probably is like 95% of it is passing through your life and never coming back to you. 80% if you're doing really, 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 really good. That is not normal. All right. And if you want to change that, you have to be willing to go, I may need to use my imagination and have some fun. So we're going to continue to go through Becoming Your Own Banker. Next time we talk about Becoming Your Own Banker, we're going to talk about the grocery store and not stealing the peas. Most people don't buy peas anymore. I can't stand peas, but it is a really relevant conversation for how money flows through our life. So we'll try to simplify it and make it fun. Brock, what do you like to buy from the grocery store? I know it's not peas.
I hate peas. I like protein bars, honey, bananas, blueberries.
We can change out whatever we need to make it make sense if it's not peas.
Yeah. My frequent trips to the grocery store are for steak. If I can find it on sale. And anytime my wife's like, all right, what are we going to eat with the steak? And I'm like, why do we need to eat anything with the steak? Anyways.
Good point.
Not marriage advice for all those listening. So we always appreciate everybody's feedback, your willingness to listen. We are so blessed and fortunate that we get to talk about something we talk about anyway, whether it went out on the airwaves or interwebs or YouTube or whatever you talk about or wherever it goes. But we're just thankful that you are here listening with us. We love feedback. We love questions. You can go to cashflowlegendz.com to send in any questions you have or learn more. And we'll really talk about how we dive into this at a deeper level next week. And we hope you all have a blessed day.